What's up guys, I'm Taylor with TK Disc Golf, and in today's video we are taking the brand new Axiom Tempo but comparing it to one of the most popular putt and approach discs of all time. We're talking about the Zone from Discraft, an ESP plastic. Both discs have very similar flight numbers, very similar feels in the hand, and I can't wait to dive into this for you guys, so let's get started. First, let's start off with the flight numbers of these two discs. This awesome Andrew Fish ESP Zone I got from Daddy Disc Golf, shout out to them for the quick shipping. Flight numbers for the Zone come in at 4 speed, 3 glide, 0 turn, and 3 fade, making it pretty overstable off the tee, whereas the Tempo has 4 speed, 4 glide, 0 turn, and 2.5 fade. So I think realistically that little bit less fade comes from the little bit of a glide boost. Looking at the side profiles, we got the Zone on the left, a little bit taller actually and a little more shoulder, but overall their parting line height, or the PLH, for both discs are pretty much identical. Once you flip them over, you can really see that the Tempo has a little bit less shoulder and a little bit lower profile than the Zone actually, so it sits a little bit lower. But moving on to what everybody is actually here for, and that is to see these two discs fly in the air. We're here at Gully Park where we film a lot of our review videos, and hole one is pretty self-explanatory. Straight ahead, a little bit of a gap to hit, and honestly for my very first throw ever with a Zone, it wasn't too bad. Pulled a little bit right, but has the stability to get back to center, and didn't quite skip up the hill, but I will have a putt. Tempo, player B always gets to correct those errors, so I give it a little bit more height and put it down the center and gave it a little bit more of a run. Really surprised I was actually able to connect on that weird anhyzer putt with such an overstable disc, but not too shabby. Honestly, hand feel though, let's talk about that a little bit. The Zone, for me, this ESP plastic feels a little bit more slick than MVP's Neutron. I'm not too familiar with this craft plastic, but it definitely has a little bit more slick of a feel. So it was wanting to slide out of my hand a little too early on some of these releases versus the grippy Neutron plastic, especially with this humidity we were dealing with. I really could just rip on it, I felt like. So I did have a little bit of a learning curve of how to get used to the grip on this disc. Hole 2 though, obviously not the best hole for two overstable putters off the tee, because 390 feet, there's no way in heck I'm going to be reaching the pin. Realistically, all I can really do is hit that initial gap as I did with both, and had two similar distance approach shots. The Zone had a little bit more work to do, about maybe 30-40 feet longer. I just really left the Zone shot for some reason a little low. Like I said, the difference in grip I'm having to get a little bit used to, but overall, two identical shots, two identical approach shots, and two absolute par chops for the easy par on that hole. Hole 3, really fun hole. Typically I'll throw a mid-range to 60% power just to ensure I get there, but ripping on these overstable putters was pretty fun too. Aiming about 25 feet to the right of the pin on both shots and throwing flat just to see what they will do. And both discs respond pretty similarly. The Tempo gets a little bit more distance because I think that extra glide helped to get there. As you can see, the Zone landed, I don't know what that is, about 15 feet shorter, leaving me a circle's edge putt, which completely airballed with that little bit of a slick grip. I had putt with Electron plastic, so I'm used to a baseline, versus this Neutron had really good tack to it just because of the humidity outside. But was able to clean up, get my par with the Zone, and score another birdie for the Tempo, getting a little bit of an early lead. Hole 4 is a nice one for some forehands with both discs, 190 feet, super simple. Just throw it out left and allow it to fade towards the pin. Zone gets inside circle, and the Tempo is doing the exact same thing, getting maybe an extra 5 feet or so, nothing too crazy. Both laying on the edge of that wood line. Realistically, I'd like to get a little closer, but it doesn't really matter when making putts. Both able to get birdie for hole 4. Hole 5 is a two-shot hole. I mean, it says 320. You'd think that's a par 3, but realistically, I've honestly never two'd this hole before because of the way the fairway's shaped. It requires a really hard hyzer off the tee, and that hyzer has to carry such an awkward distance that it's really hard to reach the pin. So with both of these shots, I'm just trying to throw a hyzer into the initial gap and get it to punch as far as I can. Zone faded a little early because I put it, I hugged that left side tree line a little bit more, and then the Tempo, I threw it a little bit wider and a little more hyzer to allow it to punch in there some more. But realistic, like I said, it's a two-shot hole, didn't really matter. Both shots have very wide open looks to get to the pin. That Zone, I had thrown a backhand approach versus the Tempo. I've got a little bit of a short, less than 100-foot pitch up like that with the kneeler forehand. But that's all I can really ask for on this hole. 2 simple tap-in pars after some routine approach shots, both backhand and forehand. Hole 6 is another forehand friendly hole and coming in super short, so really I'm trying to birdie this with both discs. 140 feet, nice forehand approach shot essentially is about this distance is. Zone gets there, very nice, and the tempo, I had a little bit of trouble on this one. I sawed it off a little too much, clip a tree, but it fortunately is able to bounce back into the fairway and get a favorable roll towards the pin, leaving me, I don't know how this is, 18 feet or so, easy work. And the zone was a little bit farther of a putt, but putted out of order essentially. But nonetheless, able to get those birdies on hole 6. Hole 7 though is one of my favorite holes on the entire course, not because it's a short hole, but I just love hitting this initial gap. It's so satisfying when you do. 210 feet, super short work for the zone and the tempo. It doesn't matter which one you pick, because as long as you hit that gap, throw it nice and smooth and flat, it's just going to fly the flight numbers and scoot on up to the pin. Ironically, a couple weeks ago when I was filming the review video for our Axiom Tempo, I actually hit an ace on this hole, which was a first for the channel. I'd never really hit an ace during a review round, so that was kind of cool. Hole 8 is also another bread and butter hole for these 2 discs, 255 feet. Sorry for the camera angle, it's really hard to film with the wood line right behind me and putting the tripod up, but 255 feet, and you're wanting to punch it around the corner after the first 200 feet. Left the zone a little wide and it hit some cabbage and slowed it down, but was able to correct it with the tempo and get all the way down to the pin. And it was at this point in the round where I realized, okay, I probably should have been alternating zone tempo first, then tempo zone to make it a little bit more fair. Not that this was a competition or anything, but obviously everybody says player B plays the best because you get to correct your mistakes. And at this point, I realized, yeah, I'm throwing the tempo to second and able to correct all my mistakes I was making with the zone. So at this point, 2-shot lead going into the final hole, which I elected to change to hole 10 because hole 9 is really hard to film. But hole 10's a fun one, 245, wide open, and you're just able to throw a nice hyzer at it. There was a very brisk headwind on this hole, so I was trying to throw that a little bit wide on some hyzer, but the zone just did not come out on the correct angle. Versus, again, corrected it with the tempo and was able to put it right underneath the basket, no issues. It's unfortunate I had that wide release for the zone, leaving me a long circle's edge putt with an overstable disc, which is I'm not comfortable with. But honestly, next time I do a video like this, I'm going to alternate every other disc instead of having tempo always be player B, because everybody knows player B tends to play the best. Overall, guys, I really did enjoy doing this comparison video of the Axiom Tempo versus the Zone. I did try to stay as unbiased as I could for being on Team MVP, but overall, both discs fly great. You can't get past that. It just depends on your style of throw and what you're looking for on any given hole. So if you want to see a different comparison, drop a comment down below with what discs we should try, and hit that subscribe button so we can see you on the next video.